Gunfire ripped across the mountain pass. Mortars slammed into the ridge under American boots. 3 Navy snipers fired. Every shot missed. Men pressed against fractured stone, bleeding, cursing. They realized too late they had walked into a trap. The enemy owned this ground. And then the quiet observer they had dismissed all morning dropped her binoculars, unzipped a hidden pack, and drew a rifle no one knew she carried. In the next 7 minutes, she would change everything. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The trucks came to a grinding halt on the ridgeline, coughing smoke before their engines died. The hour was barely 7:30, but the Afghan sun had already turned every metal surface into a stove. The valley below stretched wide, dark, and jagged, like a wound carved into the earth. Dust moved in slow spirals before breaking apart. Each gust of wind cut like a blade, then vanished, only to return from a different angle. The mountains whispered in those bursts, twisting the air in ways that bent sight lines and confused sound. Hollow Creek Pass had its own rhythm, and anyone who ignored it rarely left alive. Chief Matthew Rourke stepped down first. 42, solid frame, weathered by 2 decades of deployments. His movements carried the kind of economy that came from surviving too many ambushes. He scanned the slopes, eyes narrowed against the glare, then signaled his men to fan out. Task Force Ironclad was on the ground. Dana Whitaker followed. Compact, mid-30s, wearing the same sand-dusted plate carrier as the others, but without the weight of long rifles or extra optics. Only an M4 was slung across her chest, binoculars against her vest. On paper, she was logistics, an observer, nothing more. She paused on the ridge as the others moved. The wind pressed against her, tugging at her hair, but her stance didn't shift. She tilted her head, listening as if the valley were speaking a language only she understood. 3 snipers broke off toward a serrated outcrop. Sergeant Evan Doyle unpacked his rifle first, a heavy M2010 with custom glass. Beside him, Carter Hill and Mason Keene mirrored the same ritual. They moved like surgeons setting instruments on a tray, deliberate, precise. Their spotters checked ranges, 400 to the first gully, 650 to that boulder cluster. Numbers came clipped, efficient. The wind meters whirred, clicking out readings. Doyle cursed under his breath, rechecking his hold. Dana lifted her binoculars. Through the lenses, the pass layered itself pale rockfalls like rivers frozen mid-collapse. Darker caves cut deep into limestone. Thorny scrub clinging to what little soil remained. But what caught her attention wasn't stone or shadow. It was the air itself. Every 20 seconds, the gusts shifted, east to west, then back again, like a giant lung inhaling and exhaling sideways. Dust trails twisted, paused, then swirled again. She whispered a count under her breath, marking the rhythm. The valley was breathing. A petty officer brushed past, laser rangefinder in hand. He muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Great. Headquarters sends a secretary to watch us bleed." His smirk faded when Dana didn't respond. She only adjusted her focus and kept scanning. Chief Rourke caught the exchange but said nothing. He'd seen too many observers cycle through. Most froze when things turned ugly. Still, something about Whitaker's stillness tugged at him. She didn't carry herself like a desk officer, but he filed the thought away. There were more immediate problems. The snipers lay flat against stone, waiting for movement. Sweat cut channels through the dust on their faces. The valley stayed quiet, too quiet, until the first shapes appeared at the far gully. They weren't shepherds. The way they carried their rifles said everything. Smooth, confident, weapons held not as burdens, but as extensions of their bodies. They walked with the assurance of men who had rehearsed this ground before. "Range 650, Hill called softly. His crosshairs tracked the lead figure as the man paused in open sunlight. Doyle slowed his breathing, aligning crosshair and trigger squeeze. He exhaled, found the still point between breaths, and fired. The crack echoed off the walls, thin and stretched by distance. Dust jumped short, 3 feet from the man's boots. Miss, adjust 2 clicks right, the spotter hissed. Doyle worked the bolt, chambered again, fired. This time the round sparked off limestone. The target scattered into shadows. Keene tried next, his shot cutting too high. Hill followed, striking low. 6 rounds, 6 misses. The wind had lied to them all. Dana lowered her binoculars just long enough to glance sideways. Her expression didn't change, but her lips moved, counting with the rhythm of the gusts. The SEALs, meanwhile, muttered curses, recalculating, chasing an answer that refused to stay still. Rourke's jaw tightened. He'd led men through ambushes in Fallujah, through raids in Pakistan, through firefights that burned entire compounds down to dust. But here, his best shooters were spraying stone. Every trigger pull only betrayed their positions further. The fighters below reacted fast. Their formation split, pairs peeling into flanking caves, others setting suppressive fire across the slope. Bursts of AK rounds cracked against the ridge. Chips of rock stung exposed skin. The enemy wasn't panicking, they were executing. Then came the sound no one wanted to hear. A hollow, rhythmic thunk. Mortar tubes. The first shell landed wide, a plume of dirt on the far wall. The second walked closer, shaking stone loose around them. Dust rained from the ledges. The third burst sharp and close, the shock waves slamming men flat. A fragment grazed Doyle's arm, blood seeping through his sleeve. Keene swore as shrapnel whined past his ear. The medic crawled toward Doyle, face tight, already calculating triage against ammunition counts. Dana's binoculars stayed steady. Through heat, shimmer, and chaos, she watched the way fire positions traded rhythm. One squad pinned, another repositioned. Mortars shifted with uncanny accuracy. She muttered, more to herself than anyone else. They've rehearsed this, every angle, every ridge. Rourke turned toward her. Dust streaked across his face. What did you just say? She lowered the lenses. Her gaze was flat, direct. It's layered, interlocking fire. They knew exactly where you'd set your snipers. Another shell slammed close, rattling every bone. The pass wasn't just a battlefield. It was a trap built stone by stone, calibrated to kill Americans who thought they owned the high ground. For the first time that morning, Rourke felt the ground tilt under him. He wasn't just in a fight. He was inside someone else's design. The fourth mortar landed with a violent concussion, throwing sharp fragments across the ridge. Stone splinters cut through sleeves and nicked exposed skin. 2 SEALs went down hard, one clutching his leg, the other with blood soaking into his shoulder. The medic crawled between them, pressing gauze, his hands already red. His voice carried a single truth: they were running out of time. Above the screams and echoing blasts, Dana Whitaker's tone was calm. They're not firing blind, she said, almost evenly. Each position is covering the others, layers stacked like a net. Her eyes never left the valley. This isn't a random ambush. It's drilled. Someone studied us. Chief Rourke clenched his jaw. 15 years in special operations, and he had never seen insurgents choreograph with this kind of precision. It felt less like guerrilla chaos and more like a military exercise built around their tactics. Snipers tried again. Doyle fired, then cursed as his shot tore a puff of dust above the target. Keene adjusted, only to send his round skipping low. Hill followed, but the gust twisted the bullet wide. Each miss was another signal flare, giving the enemy exact bearings. Return fire raked the ridge. Bullets struck close enough to spray chips of stone into eyes and mouths. The sound of ricochets blended with the distant thump of mortars, the rhythm now terrifyingly steady. Donna lowered her binoculars. Dust clung to her face, but her expression didn't change. Slowly, deliberately, she unzipped a side pouch of her pack. From inside, she drew a weapon none of them had seen listed on gear sheets. The rifle was compact, matte black, fitted with a long suppressor, a Remington CSR-12 customized to the point of anonymity. Every detail screamed years of use by someone who knew exactly what it could do. She set it against stone, checking the chamber with quick, practiced hands. The ridge fell silent around her. Rourke's voice cut the tension. "Captain, you're not authorized." Dana looked up, her voice low but steady. "Neither are they." She nodded toward the muzzle flashes flickering from the valley. "But they're still firing at us." She slid prone with fluid ease, cheek against stock, movement smooth and unhurried, no wasted gestures, no hesitation. As if she had done this under worse skies. The spotters froze, momentarily forgetting their tasks. Even Doyle, blood seeping from his sleeve, stared as though watching a different kind of soldier emerge. Dana's breathing slowed, sinking with the gusts. Through her scope, the valley was not chaos, but pattern. She ignored the men sprinting between shadows and instead tracked the distortion in the air, the way heat shimmer bent lines, the way dust curled unnaturally in certain pockets. "Observer, near the mortar crew," she murmured. 2 clicks left, half elevation down. Her voice was casual, like reciting weather. She exhaled, pressed the trigger. The suppressed crack was almost swallowed by the surrounding firefight. But in the gully, the man directing mortar fire spun backward and collapsed, his radio tumbling into stone. The crew beside him froze for a heartbeat, confused. The ridge went utterly quiet. Every SEAL, bleeding or not, stared at her. Even the medic paused with bandages mid-wrap. Then the valley erupted. Enraged shouts echoed. Muzzle flashes multiplied as fighters poured fire into the ridgeline. Rocks sparked, rounds whining across cover. It was like the ground itself had turned hostile. Dana's eye never left the scope. She adjusted half a breath sooner than the next gust, riding the rhythm she'd been counting since the moment they arrived. She shifted, tracked another shape flickering behind a rock. Through the haze, she caught a faint metallic gleam, a weapon being leveled in her direction. The shooter thought the smoke would conceal him. Dana saw the distortion bend unnaturally at that exact spot. She fired again. The figure jerked, collapsed, rifle clattering against stone. One of the snipers whispered, unable to stop himself. She just shot through smoke, like it wasn't even there. His voice cracked in disbelief, like she's hunting ghosts. But the enemy wasn't finished. New plumes erupted at the base of the valley, thick canisters belching white phosphorus, rolling clouds of chemical smoke across the kill zone. Visibility shrank fast. The entire gully blurred into a solid wall of shifting white. The fighters adjusted instantly. Shouts in Pashto cut through the noise, and silhouettes began moving inside the screen, repositioning to flank. Tracer fire stitched blind arcs toward the ridge. SEAL rifles answered, but their rounds vanished into fog. Suppression without targets. Their confidence frayed with every wasted magazine. Rourke's pulse hammered. The valley was closing its fist around them, and the only calm figure on that ridge was Dana Whitaker. Her scope pressed to her eye, watching not men but the patterns of smoke itself. "Look at the drift," she said, more to herself than the others. "The wind splits it. Thin here, heavy there." Her hand nudged the dial. 1 click. The others couldn't see what she saw. A fraction of a muzzle flash flickering inside the white, almost like a trick of the eye. Most shooters would dismiss it as illusion. Dana pressed the trigger. The crack was muffled, the impact instant. The flash vanished. A body fell inside the haze, unseen by most, undeniable to those who heard the scream cut short. A stunned silence fell over the ridge. One of the SEALs spoke, his words almost reverent. "That's impossible. She's shooting phantoms." But Dana didn't flinch, didn't answer. She shifted again, eyes steady, as the valley began to tremble with the rage of fighters who had just realized someone new had entered the game. The smoke still hung heavy, curling around jagged stone. For a moment it felt as if the valley itself was breathing harder. Then Dana fired again, and everything shifted. Her bullet cut through a shimmer of heat, striking a machine gunner who had pinned their left flank. The man folded instantly, his weapon tumbling uselessly across the rocks. The suppressive fire that had rattled the ridge went silent. Rourke blinked in disbelief. His team had been bleeding under that gun for minutes. One round from her, and the battlefield felt different. Dana didn't pause. She adjusted, spotting the faint arc of dust kicked up where an RPG team crouched low, preparing another rocket. She read the trail, calculated the gust, and squeezed. The loader collapsed before he even lifted the round. Christ, Doyle muttered, clutching his wounded arm as he watched. She's tearing their playbook apart. Every shot carried its own signature. One aimed by the flicker of shadow that moved against the wrong rhythm of the wind. Another guided by the echo of a shouted order bouncing off the cliff face half a second too late. A third locked by the thin sliver of dust floating where no breeze should have carried it. Men dropped one by one, and the careful layers of fire began to shred. The enemy scrambled to adjust, their coordination cracking under invisible pressure. Shouts rose from the eastern wall. A new shooter took position. The crack of his rifle came before anyone saw him. The round smashed stone inches from Dana's head, spraying grit across her cheek. She didn't flinch. She rolled slightly, her eyes narrowing. The sniper was good. His angle was perfect. Distance nearly 700 meters. He was here for her. Rourke swore, dragging men lower into cover. We've got a counter sniper. Another shot rang. The round skipped across rock near her elbow. Dana shifted her scope, not chasing the man's body, but the dust his muzzle blast had disturbed. A faint line drifted against the natural wind. That was his perch. She tilted her rifle, resting it against the edge of broken stone. For a heartbeat, she caught his glint, just the reflection of a scope for half a second. That was enough. Her finger tightened. The suppressed crack was soft, almost gentle. The enemy rifle went silent. Across the valley, a shape slumped forward, sliding down rock until it vanished. One shot, duel finished, but victory came with no time to celebrate. Dana scanned quickly and caught sight of movement near the western ridge. Two men hauling a massive case, struggling with the weight. Behind them, others were clearing a platform, aligning it against the slope. Rourke's stomach sank. He knew the shape even before the lid opened. A KSVK 12.7mm rifle. Heavy, long range, armor-piercing. Its reach was more than enough to rip apart their landing zone when the evac bird came. If that goes live, he muttered, we're done. Dana had already moved. She broke from cover, sprinting down the incline. Bullets chased her immediately, cracking against stone, kicking shards around her boots. Cover her, Rourke roared. His men leaned out and opened up, rifles barking, tracers slashing across the smoke. Every muzzle flash they could find was answered. Dana flowed down the slope, using gullies and jutting rocks as cover. Never straight lines, never more than 3 steps exposed. The rhythm of her movement was erratic, unpredictable, impossible to pin down. At 70 meters, she dropped behind a cluster of boulders. A fighter lunged from the side, rifle up. She drew her sidearm in a blur. 2 shots to the chest, controlled and cold. The man fell without firing. She moved again, closing the distance as the heavy rifle was assembled. The crew locked the barrel into place, unaware she was already inside their arc. Gunfire from the ridge roared overhead, Rourke's men buying her precious seconds. Sparks showered from rocks where rounds hammered the stone. Dana slid into a shallow trough, crawling forward. Pistol ready, she came up 15 meters from the crew. 2 men crouched over the weapon, one loading the first round. She rose smoothly, firing twice. Both collapsed before they even registered her presence. The third man spun, reaching for his rifle. Dana's hand already held a grenade pin between her fingers. She lobbed it high, the arc perfect. The fragmentation charge landed directly across the half-assembled weapon. She dropped back behind cover as the blast thundered. Shards of steel tore the air. When the smoke cleared, the KSVK was nothing but mangled metal. Their last hope of cutting off extraction had been shattered. Rourke exhaled hard, watching from above. For the first time all day, he felt the valley tilt in their favor. But it wasn't over. Dana kept her pistol raised, scanning. Her chest rose and fell, steady despite the sprint and gunfire. She took one cautious step forward through drifting smoke. That's when the ground itself seemed to shift. A concealed hatch of rock and dirt swung open at her feet. From a spider hole barely 10 feet away, a fighter erupted, AK-103 already leveled. His eyes locked on hers. The muzzle was aimed dead center at her chest. There was no space, no angle, no time. 10 feet, point blank. No way to move first. The valley froze in that single heartbeat. The AK thundered once, but the shot went wide. Dana had already thrown herself sideways, rolling across loose stone. Her pistol came up mid-roll. 3 sharp cracks echoed. All 3 rounds struck center mass. The fighter staggered, mouth open in shock, then fell backward into the dark pit he had emerged from. The echo faded, and with it, the valley fell silent. No more mortars, no more rifles, just the dry rasp of wind through shattered rock and the distant cry of hawks circling overhead. For the first time that morning, the ambush had gone still. Chief Rourke raised a clenched fist to halt fire. His men held their breath, scanning for movement. None came. The enemy squad was broken, their positions gutted, their plan unraveled. On the ridge, the wounded were being bandaged and lifted. The medics' hands were steady now, no longer racing against inevitable collapse. For the first time in an hour, survival felt possible. Then the deep thrum of rotor blades rolled over the peaks. A Black Hawk swept in low, rotors biting at thin mountain air. Dust and grit blasted across the slope, sending loose fabric flapping. Bird inbound, a spotter shouted, though everyone already felt it in their chest. The promise of escape, of living to breathe another day. Dana climbed back up the slope with deliberate steps. She carried herself like someone who hadn't just torn apart a full ambush alone. Her weapon hung loose across her chest, but her eyes stayed sharp. Rourke moved to intercept her. His voice was loud enough to rise over the chop of the approaching helicopter. "Captain, you're not just logistics. Who are you really?" She stopped, pulling a cloth from her vest. Calmly, she wiped down the barrel, her motions precise. The one HQ calls when logistics isn't enough. It wasn't bravado. It was simply fact. She slid the cloth back into her pouch and checked her rifle again. Sergeant Keene limped past, bloodied but upright. Curiosity broke through exhaustion. "What unit, DevGru Delta?" His voice cracked with equal parts awe and disbelief. Dana looked at him for half a heartbeat, then smiled faintly. It didn't reach her eyes. No answer came. Only the silence of someone who knew better than to confirm ghosts. The helicopter hovered close, lowering ropes and clearing dust across the ridge. Men moved quickly, guiding the wounded aboard. The team hustled, every motion sharpened by adrenaline still pumping through their veins. Dana stepped aside, giving space. She waited until the last casualty was secured. Only then did she walk toward the bird. Doyle, his arm wrapped in gauze, stopped her with a gesture. In his palm sat a spent brass casing. The metal glinted in the morning sun, scuffed but whole. "This came from your rifle," he said. His voice carried the weight of realization. She looked at it for a moment, then shook her head. "Keep it. To remember there are times you change the rules, or you don't walk away." Doyle closed his hand over it slowly, nodding once. The casing would never leave his pocket again. She climbed into the helicopter without looking back. Settled into a seat near the open door, she gazed out at the valley. To anyone else it looked ordinary again, just another stretch of Afghan rock. But to those who had bled there, it was a scar that would not heal quickly. The Black Hawk lifted, rotors straining against thin air. Dust rose in a violent cloud, hiding the wreckage of the ambush. As altitude climbed, the valley shrank beneath them until it was only jagged lines and distant haze. Inside, No one spoke. The SEALs sat in silence, each man lost in thought. They had been seconds from annihilation. They were alive because someone they had dismissed as a desk officer had stepped into the storm without hesitation. Rourke glanced across the cabin. Dana sat with her rifle cradled, expression unreadable. She didn't look proud. She didn't look shaken. Just composed, like everything had gone exactly as she expected. Santos finally broke the silence. His voice was quiet, but the question carried. We're never going to see her again. Are we? No one answered, but in their silence was agreement. Operators like her didn't linger. They appeared when needed, vanished when done. Doyle shifted, feeling the casing press into his palm. He rubbed the edge with his thumb, the word forming silently in his head before he dared whisper it. Respect. The helicopter banked west, carrying them out of Hollow Creek Pass. Below, wind began to scatter the battlefield blood on stone, fragments of steel, empty brass lost to the dust. But the memory remained, of a fight saved by a woman who wasn't supposed to fire a single shot, of a ghost who had walked into their kill zone and left with every man alive. And none of them would ever again underestimate the quiet figure standing off to the side, waiting for the right moment to reveal what she truly was.